feel that doing things like this, if you can, are super important because, of course, we all tell stories to our children. Oh, when I was your age, I got to do this, or when I was your age, I got to do that with so and so. But there's one thing to be able to tell your children these stories or show photos, but there's another thing to go to these locations and share some of these experiences and tell the stories that you know and you love, and to be able to share that family history in the location that you've told them about before while you were at home or showed them pictures of while you were at home, and you get to see it through their eyes. And I was so happy to be able to do this with him. Hi everyone, I'm Lexie Callies. Do you feel the squeeze of caring for an elderly loved one and school-aged children? Then welcome to the Sandwich Stories. Let's dig in. Hiya. Hi, everybody. It's Lexie Callies with Sandwich Stories. And today I just wanted to talk about memory lane. My husband and I just took my son to Chicago for the very first time, and we had a blast. The reason why we did this was one, he had a long weekend, a 4-day weekend, which was great. We could get away. It was not snowing in Chicago yet, which in November, you never know. My mother grew up in the suburbs of Chicago on the southern suburbs near Joliet in a town called Lockport. She's an alum of Lake Forest, which, if you know Chicago, is up on the North Shore. It's a small liberal arts school, still about 1,500, 2,000 students, but and it's right on the lake. So Chicago is really special to my family, and my son had never been. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity to go down memory lane. When I started planning this trip, I realized I was really planning it for me. And my son and my husband were just kind of coming along for the ride, which was fine. I told my husband, I'm so sorry. This is really maybe not what everything you would want to do, but I want to do all these things. And he looked at me, he said, really, this is for you. We're going to have a good time. Shelby will love it. And let's just do everything you want to do. So I kind of jam packed my whole entire childhood summers into one weekend for my son. So we showed up Friday night, and Saturday morning we hit the ground running. We had breakfast around the corner from our hotel. And then we took my son to the Sears Tower. Some of you might know it as the Willis Tower, but my whole childhood, it's always been the Sears Tower. And we went up to the top of the Sears Tower and did the sky deck, which is where you go out onto these glass boxes that stick outside of the Sears Tower. And it's as if you're just floating in the air. And you has a glass floor, a glass ceiling. The only side of the cube that is not glass is the part that you walk into. And that is amazing. I don't remember it being there when I was a kid, so that was really neat to do with my son. He thought it was the coolest thing in the world. We have some really great photos. My mother would never be able to do that, regardless of it being glass. She has the worst fear of heights. She would have just probably fainted or dropped out of the floor and crawled away. But so we did that. That was really fun. Then we walked to the Bean, and the Bean is so much fun. It's a giant chrome bean, and you get to have some really good photos. It was very crowded. I forgot that the last time I was there was a Thursday, so I, of course, don't remember it being that crowded, but on a Saturday, it's very crowded. And of course, for the first weekend of Chicago, where it's 60 degrees and sunny, everybody is out. So we did that, and we then walked up Michigan Avenue um, across the canal, and they had a really fun uh, thrift clothing setup going on right there at the canal. So my son found some vintage hoodie that he just loves. He thinks is the best thing he came home with, and it cost him $8. Thrilled. And then we took the canal cruise. So the canal cruise in Chicago is iconic. It's an architecture tour. You get on the boat and you go up and down the canal and the river. I thought for sure my son would find this really boring and just, oh, mom, why are you making me do this? And it turned out he loved it. My husband gave him his phone. He took tons of pictures. I got to see iconic buildings, but I also realized that it has been a very long time since I've been to Chicago, and there's so many new buildings. It was amazing to see all these amazing new feats of architecture, and I never realized that there was so much property along the river that was open to build on until I started seeing all these new buildings, and they said, "Oh, that one opened in 2020. Oh, that one was built in 22." I never remembered it being so open and that there was land for you to build these giant skyscrapers on. So that was really neat for me to see. But then, of course, I got to see all the buildings that I know and love, and go out to the end of the river right before you get to the lake and see the lake and get some great views. And my son came out of it saying he had a really great time. I just was shocked. And then, of course, we had to have deep dish pizza. So my husband has no preference as to where he eats or what he does. He just kind of goes with the flow. So I am a Lou Malnati's girl. So we went to the Lou Malnati's up on the Gold Coast, which is a little further north, not the one that's in the Wrigley building. I've been to that one. It's fun, but very crowded. So we went up to the one on the Gold Coast, had deep dish pizza. It was my son's first time to ever have it. I think he was able to eat 2 slices, so that's not bad. And then we went home. The next day was going to be the day that we got a rental car and went out to the suburbs. So we drove out to Midway, picked up the rental car, and drove south so that I could take my son to Lockport. I got to show him all the things I grew up with. I drove by my grandmother's house that I grew up going to and spending my summers at. And it was really nice. The people who bought the house from my grandmother about 2 years before she passed away were still living in the house. The gentleman who owns it was outside working on the house, painting the trim. And so I got out, said hello, introduced myself, and then we drove over to Joliet, which is on the other side of the river, um, and got to show my son the church that 6 generations of my family were baptized in. I was the 6th generation, First Pres in Joliet. It's a beautiful, um, 1800s limestone building, beautiful, beautiful, stained glass. It was just so great to see. And then I drove him past my mom's high school, which was Joliet Central High. And it is, yet again, it was built in 1901. It is a massive, massive building, 4 stories tall, a huge city blocks worth of high school. And I, looking at it even today, can't imagine ever going to that high school. It's so big. I don't know how you don't get lost. I don't know how you get to your classes on time. I thought my son's school was big, but this was even bigger. So he got to see that. And then my favorite thing in the world, there is a restaurant that my mom worked at in high school and through college when she was home on holidays called White Fence Farm. It is a family owned business and they do fried chicken and my favorite, corn fritters, which is pretty much an excuse to eat dessert while you eat dinner, and my son got to have that. And it was so fun to go to this restaurant that I remember going to every single year of my childhood and eating the food that I loved. And it just made me so happy. And my son loved it, which made me even happier. So on Monday, then it was cloudy, a little rainy. Still felt pretty good because it was 50 degrees, and we went to the Field Museum. And the Field Museum is my favorite museum, and we got to go and see Sue, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, I grew up where Sue was the first thing you saw when you walked into the museum, but they moved her. Couldn't believe it. I was like, "Where did you put her? This is what I came to see." And they moved her at the end of an exhibit. So you have to go through this huge exhibit about dinosaurs and um, the evolution of dinosaurs. And then Sue is at the end of this exhibit. So they were smart. They moved her. Hey, why don't we get people to see all these other things that they might pass by? And just so they can get to see Sue. And I was thrilled to see her. She looked great. I got good pictures of my husband and son with her. And then I thought what would be his favorite, and it turned out it wasn't. Sue was my son's favorite. What I thought was going to be his favorite is the Egyptian exhibit. What people don't know is that the Field Museum has a vast collection of mummies and Egyptian art and jewelry and artifacts, and it's always on display. Not all of it, obviously, but they change it out sometimes. And I think it's the most amazing thing to go see because you actually get to see real mummies and you get to see mummified organs in their jars and all the just, it's just so cool to me. And then we had lunch at the Walnut Room. Now, this is still a sticking point with anybody from Chicago is that it is no longer Marshall Fields. It is the Marshall Fields building. It still says Marshall Fields on the outside, but it is not Marshall Fields, it's Macy's. But Marshall Fields on State Street was a go-to place to shop for my mom, for my grandmother, for my mom, for me. Anytime you needed anything, you went to Marshall Fields. In Marshall Fields on the 7th floor is a beautiful restaurant called the Walnut Room, and every Christmas, they put up a large tree. It's a different theme every year. It's a little different now that Macy's owns it, but it's still nostalgic to me, and we were able to get a table by one of the windows, and you could still see the tree, and we got to have lunch there, and the food is so good, and it's just fun nostalgia that anytime it was Christmas, you went to the Walnut Room, you got your picture taken by the tree, you got to do some Christmas shopping. It's just fun. And then we went up to the John Hancock building. That was great. A 360 view of Chicago and the lake. And it was a pretty clear day, so you could see a little far, not as far as you could had it been perfectly sunny, but that's okay. And that was our week. I crammed it all in there. There were things that I would do as a kid that we didn't get to do, but most of the things in Chicago we got to do. And I was just so glad I got to share this with my son. I feel that doing things like this, if you can, are super important because, of course, we all tell stories to our children. Oh, when I was your age, I got to do this, or when I was your age, I got to do that with so and so. But there's one thing to be able to tell your children these stories or show photos, but there's another thing to go to these locations and share some of these experiences and tell the stories that you know and you love, and to be able to share that family history in the location that you've told them about before while you were at home or showed them pictures of while you were at home, and you get to see it through their eyes. And I was so happy to be able to do this with him. um, some of these things I had done with my husband when we had a day or two in Chicago when we were going to go visit family, but it just wasn't the same. And I was just so happy that we were able to make this happen, to be able to have a good weekend. It wasn't snowing because I have to tell you, this is about the time I cut off the time I go to Chicago. November can be 50 degrees and sunny, or it can be covered in snow. And when it is covered in snow, I do not go to Chicago. I cut off my Chicago time normally the second week of November through Easter because, yes, I have been there and it's been the end of March and it's icy and snowy. And being a girl from Texas, I don't want to deal with it. So I just, if you have the opportunity to be able to do some of these things like we were able to do with your children, I highly encourage you to take the time, even if it's for a day. If you live close to the area, even if it's just for an afternoon or that one restaurant that you just love and it's nostalgic for you, for your family, tell those stories to your children in those locations because I feel it is something that they will remember and it will just bring some of that history and joy to life for them and they'll take it in a little bit better. So that's what happened this weekend, and I had a great time. So, the song of the week was picked out by Shelby. Because this episode is about spending time with him, I thought he should pick the song. It has nothing to do with nostalgia, it has nothing to do with going to Chicago. It's really just a song he thinks is fun and cool, and it's old to me. I remember it when I was a kid. It is Cantaloop by US3. It's also sometimes called Flip Fantasia. I know if you're my age at 44, you're going to know this song. You're going to think, oh my gosh, when was the last time I heard this song? But Shelby thinks it is the best song right now, and I'm here for it. I am happy he picked this one out. So go back down memory lane for yourself if you're my age. US3, Cantaloop, Flip Fantasia. All right. Okay. Thanks, guys. See you again. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to Sandwich Stories. I really hope you learned some new things and enjoyed it. If you did, tell a friend, tell your mom, tell your sister, tell your dad, tell everybody you know to also listen. Maybe they'll learn some new things, how to help each other out, and find us at Sandwich Stories Podcast. Thanks so much.